Right, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Cabinet on the 27th of June. We brought this forward from the 4th of July, so thank you for making time for it in your diaries. It's much appreciated. I think the microphones aren't working. Is that right? Are we having problems or they're just not working?
They're a bit hit and miss.
Hit and miss. So should we just say, let's leave microphones off for this evening then? Make sure that they're not intermittent. We just speak loudly and clearly and we'll all be okay. Apologies for absence. We have got some apologies for absence. They are from Councillor Janice Westwood, Councillor Andy Smith, and everybody else is here, which is good. In terms of your declarations of interest, any declaration of interest? No. Excellent. As always, then, if any declarations do arise during the meeting, please feel free to interrupt whoever's talking. Make it really clear your declaration as you possibly can. Appreciated. First item on the agenda tonight is the medium-term financial strategy. Councillor Strachan, over to you. Maybe supported by.
Thank you, Leader. I feel like it's appropriate to start the first cabinet meeting of the new term with the first pass of the medium-term financial strategy, and hopefully it's a fairly simple paper that I'm bringing tonight. We'll take you through the recommendations. Obviously, we're agreeing the budget setting timetables, which you'll see at paragraph 1.6, and I seek agreement from Cabinet to agree those at this point. I also seek your agreement to the cautious principles, which I would say have served us very well, which I'll rehearse at 3.7. I propose no changes to those at this stage in the previous budget principles. The assumptions at this stage you'll find within the report at 3.8 and 3.9, and they are guided largely by the Office for Budget Responsibility projections and will of course be refined over the life of the emergent MTFS as we work towards agreement in the early part of the next year. We also set out the current scenario of the MTFS as it was at the end of last year, with those various elements included at paragraph 3.1 through to the end. You'll also see, members, in the recommendations, I seek your agreement on the budget consultation. That has been circulated to comment and is at appendix, I believe, D. I believe that to be a robust and comprehensive consultation plan, and will hopefully continue the trend of upward engagement with our budget consultations. And finally, members, I seek agreement to accept funding formally from the Rural England Prosperity Fund, which is £400,000, and which I believe I mentioned in our last cabinet meeting of the last council. Are there any questions?
I'm sure there are. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, Leader. At 3.9, the budget assumptions, Rob, where we're looking at the CPI and RPI,
Yes, mate.
and obviously you can see that the two that are in red. It then moves quite dramatically in 24, 25, 25, 26. And I just wanted a bit of explanation as to how we've got those figures, or where those figures have come from, or who supplied them to us, please.
Yeah, they're based on the Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts. They're in the Economic and Fiscal Outlook from March of this year, and obviously they're under review. We keep them under review throughout the MTFS process, and we make changes to reflect any updates as and when we need to reflect the more up-to-date economic conditions. So yes, as they are at the moment, they're published figures which are designed to guide us all in that process.
Are we likely to see those move upwards as opposed to where they're presently at the moment, realistically?
I can't say at the moment, Mike. It just depends on what the OBR publish. But that will dictate. It may well be that there are refinements coming forward. We've seen that inflation isn't quite falling at the rate that was previously projected, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, just going to the risk description at the near the end of page 9, and it talks about current score red for 2 issues: C, review of new homes bonus regime; D, the increase of localisation of business rates. This is all. I take it this is all the uncertainty from central government. I do think, Leader, this is an opportunity where we should be again lobbying our MP, Sir Michael, to see if there's anything actually that he should be pursuing this for us. I know the LGA are doing some work, but I think it would help if our MP can also join in that conversation and really push government on this, because the problem of the uncertainty is for many authorities is that they just don't know what's going to happen. And I know we haven't in our forecast looked at new home bonus as a stream, but many authorities do, and there'll be a big impact if that is withdrawn. So I think we need to be pushing government to see exactly what the likelihood is of it's continuing or finishing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that we should continue lobbying via our MP and via the other routes that we have. And I know that Councillor Wilcox uses his good offices with the LGA to advance that course as well. And I hope they'll continue to do so. We will certainly start to get some put together a lobby letter and take that forward.
Can I suggest we write to both of our MPs?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, both, sorry.
Be very helpful.
Yeah.
Nice. Mike, any more from you?
Not at the moment, Leader, thank
No,
you.
okay, brilliant. No more, Richard?
Yeah, 3.19 made reference to the Rural England Prosperity Fund. Third bullet point, in terms of rural communities, active travel enhancement in the local area, 100,000. Could you, any detail behind?
I would imagine this was behind the bid that was put together by the previous cabinet member in that area. I don't know whether any officer is able to put any flesh on the bones on that. I have got to admit, while I have the bids, the Rural England Prosperity Fund somewhere in depth in my email, I don't have it to hand.
I'm sure part of it, I can get you the detail, but I'm sure part of it is extending the bus routes out to some of the more rural areas and to reflect. I think it's been a pattern in the locations and I'm sure that was part of that big.
This one, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just going to see how it's going to be actually spent. We'll see exactly how it can benefit. We'll see.
Okay, brilliant. Any more community?
No.
No. Oh, no, yeah. My question about the well, basically the opportunity to have a bigger central government about both the risks that flagging red are both able to play out at the friends down central government, which is always a frustration to us, but clearly local government up and down the country, perhaps more so of a risk in terms of the severity of that to the local authorities and this to us. And two things, just fully endorse the continuation of the policy. We are not including any income from homes bonus. I think that stood us very well in the past in terms of ensuring that we don't put that into our core budget, which is very helpful and good to see that continuing as well. And then obviously on the budget consultation process, again, I think we had a long conversation about this, about how we can engage more and more people. I think are we there yet? No, I think actually we're quite far away from where we really want to be, but I think this is a huge step in the right direction and we'll continue to build on that. So it's setting in the right direction. So thank you for that. If there's no more questions, sorry, Mark.
Just finally, I think I'll bring up the old chestnut about multi-year settlements. I think if we've got the opportunity to be lobbying government, we ought to mention the multi-year settlement piece as well.
Yeah.
Again, I think the more we go on about it, perhaps that someone will listen at some stage.
I think we could probably use letters from previous years.
Probably.
We've got lots of them.
We'll just enclose all the previous letters and say we still haven't seen any
Still.
results.
Well, I think we just need to continue.
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah. Do we have any idea? Are there anything coming out of central government about multi-year settlements other than press releases?
No, I mean, last year we got, in reality, it was a 1 year numbers with the set principles, which had some wriggle room around. I mean, government policy at the moment is it's looked at in 25, 26. I think most experts in the field believe that's unrealistic because it would be the first year after an election, a government, whatever form it is, it's unlikely to be a priority for the new government. So it's probably going to be 26, 27 or later. That would be to our benefit because we would be able to retain business rate growth, etc. But you know, a different government might take a completely different view of what's been done today, and it starts again fresh, to be honest. So that probably doesn't help at all in terms of multi-year settlements. I was just saying we've had 5 single year settlements since 1922. So any form of robust forward planning is incredibly difficult. You add on to that COVID, cost of living, all the other things, inflation. It's such a difficult environment to plan for 1 year, let alone 4 months.
You would think, Leader, the number of authorities who are getting themselves into financial trouble, that the government would actually wake up and swallow the coffin and think, actually, what are the reasons behind some of this? Because they're not all bad management. Some of them are the fact that they're not able to budget correctly going forward. So you think the government would pick up on that and actually intervene and do something? Anyway, thank you.
One would have thought, wouldn't they? Right, Councillor Strachan, over to you for the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Leader. I move recommendations 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3.
Brilliant. All in favour, indicate. Great, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Councillor Strachan. Thank you, Anthony, as well. Sticking with you, Councillor Strachan, we've got the procurement matters update. Let's see if your procurement scene as well. Welcome.
I have, Leader, and I'm very pleased to introduce Sarah Carrington and Ollie Shaw, who represent our procurement team here, and I'd like to thank them for their work to date with this one. This paper measures our progress against the strategy, sets out this year's progress and next year's action plan, and our own scoring against national matrices that, I don't know if that's the right word, but national matrices that set out what we're going to do. And it also sets out the wider picture and the horizon scanning for procurement at the end. I think most importantly is to stress at this stage that we are rolling out training to staff. And I know that Sarah's updating me that she's doing that by keeping in touch sessions and bringing new staff that we've taken on up to speed, whilst also doing refresher sessions for our existing caseload. There is a plan to do the same for councillors coming forward. I'm looking forward to seeing, I've certainly seen some proposed slides. I'm looking forward to seeing how that training to get everyone embedded in procurement is going to come forwards. And the aim of that really is going to be promoting awareness of how it works, where it sits within the authority, what we're doing now, and what we could probably do better. You'll see at 3.12 our current tracking of activity against the key performance indicators. And of course, if there are any questions, I'm sure that either I or the team will be able to deal with those. I had the benefit of a briefing session this afternoon with Sarah, and she's particularly updated me on the issues around social value, which I know will be of interest to members. There is a plan to bring forward a social value policy, which is likely to hit the autumn cycle of meetings, to be built around 4 pillars and mirroring the literature of the 2050 document, which is going to be coming forward. And that will be promoting confident communities, promoting prosperous communities, active and healthy communities, and an aim to be the greenest communities nationally. I very much look forward to seeing how that comes forward. But once that policy document's in place, you'll see within the report that's before us tonight, we say that 30% of our procurement activity is planned, and we can embed those social value indices into that policy. What it needs to have is greater relevance with the reactive. And so having that policy underpinning everything we do will mean that that's the main touch point. And I propose to bring that through a full scrutiny process to maximise the number of touch points for councillors and with members, and to really build a truly robust policy as we move forward. And so that's the short term aim, and I think with the plan this year within the
Any brilliant questions? Mike, over to you.
Okay, the future procurement plan at 3.21, the bottom bullet point, which is in my area of I was going to say my area of expertise, but no, it's not an area of expertise for me, but my area that I'm looking after and learning a lot from. And interestingly, I had a meeting with the chair of scrutiny last week, and we talked about what more we can do in relation to procurement, in as much as making sure that suppliers that we utilise and use meet our criteria in relation to some of the work around single-use plastics, etc. And I know, and I've spoken to the member for finance who said that we'll be able to bring things forward and add into the policy as we develop that strap line as to where we want to be on the, particularly around the climate change and the environmental issues. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to add those in as they develop. We can put into the procurement policy to make it more in keeping with our views and policies and our beliefs here at this
I completely agree, and whether it finds its way into procurement policy or whether it's set in policy by other things that come through your own portfolio, it's certainly something that I'm very keen to promote, and so we'll get those moving. I look forward to seeing documents in the fullness of time.
Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Regardless, obviously, in your recommendation, and of course, the reference to modern slavery and human trafficking, which is obviously extremely important to us. In the event that a supplier doesn't meet those standards, are we taking the tough line that we will not procure?
I don't believe we've encountered that situation yet. I'm looking for a shake of the head down the line. I certainly would say that the political line is absolutely not. And if there are ways that we can extricate ourselves from contracts by virtue of that, I seem to recall that was written into the modern slavery and human trafficking policy, which I took to council, I think about 2 years ago. There were clauses by which we could extricate ourselves from those contracts, and I think I'll certainly set in the tone saying we look to do that if we found it.
Brilliant. I think just in terms of more question rather than competition, it's just about the level of spend within the districts. I know we've purposely tried to gear procurement strategies that allows us, so it will allow us to procure more from within the district, but it's one of the obvious areas that's shifted into the red. I think there's a perfectly adequate explanation for that, but I think it's useful to perhaps articulate that for those who are on the table, because it's tracking in the wrong direction, but clearly we've got limited control over it, in particular with doing large scale contracts. But
yeah, I know that if I try and answer that, I will mash it horribly. So I'm going to let one of the experts actually give the answer to you on that one. I might pick it up.
Yeah, so we obviously do have that frustration as well in terms of when we're running procurement exercises. So one of the ways that moving forward we're looking to try and mitigate that and make it more accessible to sort of local and SMEs is when we are going out to tender, and particularly for lower value contracts, we're trying to engage with suppliers and running sessions just to sort of let them know what they should expect from the tender documents, what sort of questions will be asked. And we are aware that sometimes people have done full procurement exercise and not going to bother or haven't got the resource or capacity to do that. So we're just trying to make them as user friendly as possible, and making sure people feel that they can bid and respond to tenders where they are available.
thank you. And where we've got, sorry, you're going to.
I was going to say, so Sarah briefed me this afternoon that there is a document with a whole heap of ways that procuring bodies can effectively take things out of a more formal procurement strategy in order to procure as locally as possible. But local authorities are expressly excluded from carrying that out. And so while I'd love to see us here as a district carry out a literally district first ethos, at the moment there is potentially a little bit of tension between that and best value, and that's a bridge that we're going to have to find a way to cross. And I'd hope that that will come forward as we start to build in social value, as we start to build in more local elements. That's something that we can really find the answer to. Yeah, we don't have it just yet, we're working on it.
And in terms of reporting, so where we probably just being down into the detail of this a little bit, perhaps too much, but so if we were, and I'm just thinking we're clearly contracting some big ticket items in the coming year. We award a contract for a leisure centre, for instance. Perhaps it's a bad example, just in case we go down the wrong route with this. We award a large contract, and there's a main contractor who's based in London, but they then subcontract all of their services through subcontractors who are based in the district. Would we still report that as if we were procuring outside of the district, or do we actually reflect the full value chain and actually encapsulate that actually whilst 10 million might have gone outside of the district, 9 of it's come back in through subcontractors by the contractor?
I answer it how we do it now. So the way it's done at the moment is we look at postcode of the supplier. So in your example there, that would be a London postcode, so yeah, classed outside. I think we would, if we were going to look beneath that into subcontractors, we'd have to probably balance out the level of work and whether they're prepared to provide that information versus the information it provides. But I know Sarah is looking at other ways of measuring that metric, which might overcome that type of limitation in the current approach.
Right, TBC, I get it.
Yeah, but so it might be things like the number, rather than looking at total spend, but the number of local contractors we're asking to tender, how many are applying to those tenders, and then adding some idea as to if they're not applying, why aren't they applying? So building on the sessions and the focus that Sarah's trying to build, which encouraging people, because a lot of this is about providing opportunity to provide services to the council and make it simple and easy as possible. But I think we have got to accept that there are a number of big contracts that council provides where the suppliers just aren't located in the area. You know, the new waste street, the leisure centre, a lot of the IT licenses with Microsoft, etc. So I think our role is to provide the opportunity and make it as easy as possible for those suppliers to do.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Linda. I just want to make a comment really and just say how pleasing some of this is to read. You know, the constant repetition of social value. You know, in my professional life, I've dealt with lots of voluntary organisations, and I think that, you know, when you're procuring for something, whether it's big or small, you know, you can't just look at what's the cheapest option, and I'm really pleased to see this doesn't do that. You know, you look at what's the environmental impacts on the district, you know, what's the impact that volunteers can make in these kind of things is really important. So just a comment really, just to say that the emphasis on social value, I think it's a really important part of this procurement strategy. So thank you to Councillor Spratt for doing that. Thank you.
Did I see another hand come up over here? Is it a real?
No, I thought about it.
Will, you sure? Brilliant. Okay, in which case it's moved to recommendation.
Okay, recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 standing in my hand, Mike.
Brilliant. All those in favour can indicate. Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Thank you, Councillor Ollie as well. Appreciate it. Still with you. This is the final one for you. Money Matters 2022-2023 review of financial performance against the financial strategy.
Yep, this is the, as you said, the formal review of where we were against the financial year 2022-2023. The report, the revenue budget did increase, and so is higher than forecast, and so there is a certain reliance on reserves. That is largely because some of the benefits of further grants that we received and some salary savings are offset by lower than forecast planning income and incubator space income. And some additional actuarial strain as a result of the restructure. It's hoped that at least some of that will be one-off items and that it won't become a trend. Planning income is certainly rather below target, although income from trade waste, you'll have seen, was considerably above target, and so it's hopeful that that they may, in time, start to settle down. You'll see the result of that is the general reserves currently stand at £5.9 million, which is down from the £7.1 million forecast, although is not an overwhelming sum at this stage. The capital programme is also below the approved budget, although much of that is due to works that we slipped into the next year, so it hasn't been lost. It's just not taking place in the year. You'll see income is significantly down, but that is because of a single big ticket disposal of a property, which hasn't quite taken place at this stage, and we're still optimistic that will happen in the short term. Turn to performance. Our council tax collection is in the top quartile and is the second in Staffordshire, I was advised this evening. And the work from that team is consistently amazing. The collection rate is astonishingly high. And so I'd like to thank them for their efforts and also the compassion that they show when dealing with those issues. Our business rate performance is also in the top quartile, and I'm told is the best in Staffordshire. And so both have resulted in an increase in income in those sectors. Our investments are performing a little bit below where we'd hoped they would, although are largely covered by the funds that we set up to cover any losses on those. And the advice from our treasury management advisors is that they remain a long hold. Finally, I'm very sorry that Ian Eady isn't here to hear me say this. Our payment of suppliers in 30 days has now tracked above the 90% target at 92.7%. There are still efforts in place to increase it to closer to 100%. Maybe they are never achieved. We will do our level best. But I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to the team for their efforts in dragging it up to where it ought to be and where a properly and fair dealing council should have it. Are there any?
Anything else in the tracking? I've taken my question. Well, it wasn't.
Yeah, and my
comments.
comments.
We've gone north of
Brilliant.
90%, which is brilliant, brilliant news. And we're headed. It's good to see the 100% figure is still talking well. We won't stop at 90%. It's still there. We really know well done to the team. Mike, did you say your question has been answered already?
Some of them, I just wanted to comment on the trade waste really. I think it's something probably we play out and we could do better probably in the future. So I'd like to think that we can really build upon that. I think it's an area that we can expand, and there's some other bits and pieces that we can look at in relation to that as well. So pleasing to see that in that sort of area.
Thank you. It's an area where you do the work and I reap the reward.
Yeah, I love it. That's live for me. Thank you.
We look forward to
There
reporting
was-
back on progress.
Yeah, there was something else. The sale of the sale of the property that didn't go through.
Yes.
Is that likely to happen this year? I mean, are we confident it is going to happen?
I
And the
believe
figure that
so,
you're
and
talking
I
about.
see optimistic nods down the table, so
And
I'm going
the
to say
same-
yes.
Okay, that's quite a sizable chunk of money, isn't it?
Is it?
Okay, thank you for that. Carry on.
Good. Okay. Richard, any from you?
No.
No. Alex? No. Mike, there's no questions from me because I was just going to comment on the, well, actually, there was a question for me. What is it that we're doing in terms of council tax collection rates? Are we doing something differently at LDC, which is driving those council tax collection rates up? Because I know that we don't have a huge team of dogs and enforcement agents going door to door. We're doing something that's encouraging people to pay. So I'm wondering what it is that we're doing that's keeping us in the top sometimes.
I think it's probably testament to the team members and the leader of that team. I agree. I mean, it's been consistent ever since Nicky's been here that we've been in one of the higher performers, even during COVID. In addition to dealing with the normal collection, they were the ones that were giving out the business rate grants. Latterly, they've done the council tax rebate scheme. So they've not only done their day job, they've done the added value stuff that is supporting the community. And it may be moving forward that the more advantageous local council tax support scheme, it helps them even further in terms of they're not going to be chasing debt from people that can't afford to pay. But to me, in my view, it's all down to the team leader and the team that support her.
Brilliant.
I agree. I've said informally to you, leader, and other members of cabinet, that my watchwords effectively to this portfolio are that we are responsible for public finances, but we're also compassionate, and we recognise that sometimes things are hard, and we take whatever steps we can to make it easier for people. And I think that Nikki, as leader of that team, is absolutely the epitome of that. I extend certainly my personal thanks to her for her efforts in that proposal.
Perhaps can I suggest then that we are Kevin, we are saying thank you for what she's doing. Absolutely. If we could sort of- Thank you. My handwriting is terrible. She wouldn't be able to read it. Brilliant. Thanks all. Any more questions on that paper before we move to the recommendations? Are you scrolling to remind
There
yourself?
was-
Yeah.
Yeah, there was something I wanted to mention about the optimistic versus the pessimistic. And I can't find where it is now, but for the year 25-26, a big difference in optimistic and pessimistic, Anthony. I just wondered, and I can't find it on here where it is. I've got it written down a bit of paper. You might be able to tell me exactly where it is. Can you see it? Oh,
I think it's in the
I think it's in the MGFS paper.
MGFS report.
oh, sorry.
But I think
Too late.
I'm
Sorry
quite
about that.
happy to answer it.
Well, sorry,
Let's
Leader.
go- Yeah, let's go for it. This way.
It just reflects that what the path of finance reform would take. So
Yeah.
the pessimistic is if almost as if the worst case scenario for district councils is implemented. So we have all of the business rate growth, new homes bonus disappears, and there is absolutely no transitional
that.
funding. The optimistic is that we get to keep some of the growth, new homes bonus stays, and there are other grants on top of it. That, to me, that range just shows the uncertainty of policy basically in this area. And you know, you see it with Bank of England forecast, the bank forecast, it's like that's all it is it's a huge range of uncertainty.
Am I allowed one more, Leader?
Go on, then. As long as it's on this paper.
It also relates then to our position of our general reserves by 26-27. are not too far away from our actual minimum level of reserves. So, you know, there's some issues there that we'll have to look to make sure that we're rebuilding those reserves going forward.
I mean, I suppose from my perspective is that a trend of using general reserves to balance the budget is something that is a signal of future problems. I'm confident that several reasons that I don't need to be concerned at this stage, because one, it makes the assumption that financial reform is implemented in 25-26 before government's announced. I think there's a lot of uncertainty about that in the year and the form of it. Secondly, I think the council has proven previously that when it comes to making difficult decisions, it's prepared to take that. So that gives me some confidence. And I think thirdly, I think there are other levers around what we can and can't do, and it can be things. I mean, the lobbying is a good point. We can not only convey our voices as a single district, but across the sector with various groupings, and we're not alone in this.
No,
Every council, especially districts, are in this situation, so there is a large voice there.
no, leaders, thank you for letting me go back. I think what you're saying is absolutely right, Anthony, you know, and I feel assured that we are going in the right direction and that we will be there, but it just shows you how close it can get between the minimum and actually what we hold as in our general review. So thank you anyway. Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks, Anthony. Do you want to move to your recommendations? John?
Yes, okay, I can just get back to them on this document. I move recommendations 2.1 through to 2.5 be approved by Cabinet and that 2.6 be recommended.
Right, thank you. Ordinance Gate support, that's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Thank you, Anthony, as well. In both Sarah and I as well for taking the conference tonight.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Right, next item on the agenda then is agenda item number 6, handily entitled "A Cinema for Lichfield District." This is a paper in the name of Councillor Andy Smith, who can't be with us this evening, so I'll be leading on it. I should point out that the Appendix A is in confidential, so if we stray, well, don't stray into anything that's in the appendix. Don't stray. If we do need to have a discussion, and this paper is purposely been put at the end of the pack, so that if we need to move into confidential, we can do so seamlessly. However, we will wait for Rhiannon to ensure that we are offline and fully in confidential before that ensues. But let's try and keep as much as we possibly can in open session. We'll reserve any confidential items to the end. It's fairly meaty paper. There's a lot in there. So what I'm going to do is go through each of the recommendations one by one and just give a bit of a background of each recommendation. The detail is in the rest of the paper, but I can give it enough sufficient fleshing out the recommendations to allow us to have a proper discussion about it. Essentially, this is an update paper on where we are with the negotiations for the joint venture with Evolve Estates and to create a new cinema. Updates on the outcome of the negotiations with Evolve, the structure of the LLP, and also a new proposal that's come forward as part of those negotiations in terms of how the freehold of the site is best shared between us, the JV, and the development partner to ensure that we're all able to achieve the outcomes that we need from that site. There were a lot of questions around particularly in some of our earlier conversations about the cinema, about Evolve, who they are, who their ultimate owners are, all those sorts of things that's introduced into this paper as well. And also the independent valuations of the full site, which supports the recommendations back at 1.2. The numbers involved in that are clearly part of the appendix, those are confidential numbers. Finally, then it just sets out the structure of the joint venture. So I think we've got a really good partner with Evolve, but as a very good councillor by the name of Councillor Woodward once said to me, good fences make good neighbours. And I think it's really important for us to ensure with Evolve that we really have a strong understanding of what our relationship with them is, understand our relationship with them, just to enable us to be good neighbours in the future. I think that'll stand us in a good step. So recommendations. 2.1 that we note progress on the creation of the JV with Evolve Estates. I think that's all fairly well understood, fairly straightforward. That we also note the detailed information provided on the financial standing in the Royal Estates and also the independent valuations of the site, but the site, Debenhams building and the retail units and the apartment proposal of the Goodwood shop, which is units 32 to 44. Recommendation 2.2 is that we as cabinet agree and recommend to full council that our freehold ownership of the entire Three Spires shopping centre, which we have had for a number of years now, a large number of years, that freehold, excluding the freehold of the Debenhams building, is exchanged for the leasehold of the 6 retail places. So that's numbers 32 to 44. That one might require some conversations and questions about. So my chief executive can correct me when not if I go, but when I go wrong with this. The freehold of Three Spires shopping centre has been owned by the council for a long time. And we have taken a rental off that freehold for a number of years. It was about 150,000 pounds. I think we never quite tracked our budget to that, but that's what we budgeted. As part of the joint venture deal that we did with Evolve, I was about to say earlier on this year, but probably last year now, we agreed to forego that rental income, and Debenhams have been empty for 2 or 3 years, or 2 years at that point. We agreed to forego that income. So as of today, our freehold ownership of Three Spires retail shopping centre gives us no rental yield at all on an annual basis. Whilst you might say there's a value in the asset in terms of the freehold being an asset, we are generating no cash revenue stream from it. So the proposal is that the freehold ownership of that, excluding the Debenhams building and the 6 retail units, which if you're looking up to Debenhams, is all the shops on the right hand side, right at the older units, essentially with the sort of the dogs to sort of roof. We exchange those. So Lichfield District Council will end up not having the freehold of the entire site, but we will have the freehold for the 6 retail units and the long leasehold for those 6 retail units. That's the swap. So we essentially then own ground, the buildings, and the contractual relationship with the tenants in those retail units. That allows us to bring forward the longer term vision, which is to create that punch through and at the very, very top, so it's the top 4 retail units to begin with, that create the space around Debenhams so that the cinema can bring out its terrace, can have its outdoor space, punch through there, bring down the multi-story. All of a sudden you've got that opening out into the building world. I hope I've painted a sufficiently clear picture of what we're attempting to do with that and the way that the land is moving around. But happy to take questions on that as well. Next recommendation then is that the leader, the chief exec, and another member of the leadership team at Lichfield District Council become the council's 3 reps on the LP board. Next, that we approve delegated authority to the cabinet member for finance and commissioning. I was about to say, which is currently Councillor Strachan, which will be Councillor Strachan for the remainder of our years. In consultation with the Assistant Director of Finance and Commissioning and our monitoring officer, to approve the business plan. So that's essentially making sure that anything that changes the operation of that LLP will go through at least 1 cabinet member along with an assistant director, if not more, to make sure we've got sufficiently robust overview process or scrutiny process over that. Next up, the cabinet delegates authority to the leader and chief executive in consultation with the monitoring officer and the 151 officer to complete any contracts, say all contracts and demolition related to enabling works. So what do we need to do? Bring down the multi-story, we need to do a whole load of the works to bring that work forward. And so again, we're just getting the key people in to make sure that we've got some good governance over that. And finally, that we recommend to full council update the NTFS, both to reflect the stamp duty and the leasehold of 104,000, to increase the budget in a capital programme for a loan advance, and this is really down to inflation from 5.349 to 5.78. That's an estimate at the moment. I think that's Anthony being prudent and cautious, which is the right thing to do, of course, but it enables to make sure that we've got the cash there should we need it. And also to continue with the approach that the revenue budget is basically budget neutral. There's a lot there, and I appreciate we packed all that into one paper. Shall we go through? I wouldn't normally do this, but just to keep questions focused and make sure that our debate is logical, as it were. Should we go through each of those recommendations one by one, and let's keep the questions based on each recommendation, if that's all right. I'll just stop us jumping around. Are we broadly happy with 2.1? I think that's really a sort of a noting and informing type piece of information. I know there was a lot of conversation around evolving states, and I think this is really just seeking to bring some confidence in that, they're good for their money and they're going to be a very good partner, which I think we know, but it formalises in this paper. Is anyone happy with that? I'll take a vote on all of them at the end, but yeah, so if you give me the question, actually. 2.2 then, this is the land exchange. Mike.
Yeah, I think the wording in 2.2 could be tightened up somewhat. I don't think me reading it, whilst I understand from what you're saying in here now, I don't know whether that is actually what is actually reported at 2.2. I presume that the advice we've had is this is the best way forward for us going forward as a council, to give up the freehold of everywhere except Debenhams, and also we keep the freehold of the 6 retail. Yes.
Yes, that's right.
But if you read it, and it says excluding the Debenhams building and 6 retail units to be exchanged for the leasehold of the same 6 retail properties. I just think it might just be me, I don't know whether we need to say actually that we are keeping the freehold of Debenhams and the shops, but the leasehold for the same, for those 6 retail properties will transfer to.
So
Yeah, it could be, it just doesn't read right to me.
You've got excluding and halfway through a sentence, so it's not
Yeah.
clear beyond that. I think what you're saying.
Just for historic, future reference, just that we're absolutely sure we've nailed it correctly in that 2.2.
I think what we really need is brackets around excluding the Debenhams. If we imagine brackets around excluding the Debenhams building.
And the 6 retail units. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it might just be if everyone else is that. You're right, I'll just read it.
And whilst we might know what we mean, I'd want it to be written down properly and not just off a verbal introduction from me.
While we're arguing semantics in that clause, I'm fairly sure it's called Baker's Lane. Not Baker's
Oh, there we are.
There we go.
But the
you
bracketing
are
that is
It's-
makes far more sense. I just think for the sake of a land transaction of this scale, it's worth making absolutely sure.
Mm. Freehold of a large site, and I think if we can make sure that the comms that go out supports what we're doing and the advice that we've had, etc., then I think it's the right thing to be doing. I just think it's for Joe Bloggs in the who won't have the understanding that or have been through all the process that we've been through, just to make it as simple as possible as to why we're doing this and the real good reasons behind why we're doing it. I think is important so that we get the right message out.
Yeah, can agree with that. Any more, Richard?
In general, really, rather than just the recommendation.
Yeah, go for it.
I was interested to read in terms of the risk description of the risk of the owner and so forth. So from our original scoring, we currently then obviously have a better reading of it in terms of likelihood on the top A from yellow to green, impact red to impact yellow, and the flooring continues with the yellow. So we are seeing improvements of our risk. So that's encouraging for me to obviously look at it as a risk element to it. And I feel I'm certainly more comfortable that we're covering our risks and actually know that it's a good decision for the district. So really it is that comment, and I suppose there is a question is how have we got there, but I think that will probably be later, but I think I'm satisfied in knowing that we have covered that and we've seen those improvements. The other one, and it really is again not to put a fly in the ointment in any way, but of course, and again I've done some research today regarding, or yesterday I should say, regarding Cineworld and the news about the UK seeking administration. I don't think that should, reading the way it's being proposed, should deflect us from any decision moving forward. Because actually what they are saying is that actually operation wise, they will still be continuing. I think what it is it's trying to clear a separation from the parent company and everything else. So I think it's in a sense, the way I've read it, and through the local industry magazine that in terms of it, which I've read, is that it's actually, it isn't saying that things are bad, actually it's just regrouping and business will be as usual. So I really just wanted to express that, you know, I'm in terms of the adventure, the venture, I should say, is that I'm more comfortable with it as well. In the there might be some negative comment regarding, well, we've passed that way. Well, I think it's good news.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more?
The other positive spin in all this is the fact that we are still I'm going back to we are still holding the freehold of those 6 units. So it does stop anyone actually doing anything without our consent. Which gives us that bit of peace of mind that someone just couldn't come along and completely wipe everything out and do something else.
Yeah.
The fact that we still hold that, which I think is a good point, and again, a good point for us to remember and comment on in our security for us as a council and that side, which is important to us.
It gives us control from there, that gives us control of the key element of the site, which is, the breakthrough site. Okay, I'm going to carry on through the recommendations then. I'm going to go to 2.3, which is, well, this is just governance issues. Any questions about that? 2.4 then, scheme of delegation, making sure that we've got the right people to agree business plans, etc. at the right time. Everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
Just say,
Yeah, please do, yeah.
So those two recommendations are phrased in that way to remove the possibility of conflicts of interest by having people like twin hats in.
Yes.
So there's deliberately two different sets of people involved in this, and to try and remove that risk.
Thank you. 2.5 then, again, scheme delegation, top questions. 2.6, which is about updates on our ETFs. I should say, and let's say earlier on, sorry, in terms of our negotiations regarding the LP structure and commercial sanctions, there's one item that we probably should, well, two that we should highlight, which is the fact that we're now contemplating a phase 1B, so we've got a shared ambition by both parties to actually continue our relationship. But that's in a point that in principle we think this would be a good idea, but actually let's not get too hung up on every single detail now, because actually we'll be too busy talking about the next phase instead of reviewing the first phase. So it's kind of an assumption that yes, we continue to like to work together, but we're very much in a caution stage there. It's by no means a certainty, but we've set it up to allow us to enable it to continue. And then just the final the commercial assumption, which is the original assumption, was that the evolved states would draw down their investment slightly quicker than the council, which is in terms of giving them a slightly tolerance on that. And that's been really goes down about 50, so we've got to draw down a connection on a legal basis. Council's checking.
Can I particularly welcome the equal drawdown from day one? I took the view as the project was being initiated and as we were going through it, that this was shared investment, shared risk. And that uneven drawdown sat slightly uncomfortably with me in terms of I felt that we were bearing more of the risk for longer.
Yeah.
And so that being renegotiated to a 50-50 basis, I would particularly welcome.
Brilliant. Good to hear. Right. Anyone? Mike,
Can I just have
back to you?
one
Yeah.
final,
Yeah, yeah.
on the risks, the legal challenge from the developer, the further we go down the road with this, is the chance of a legal challenge, is it diminished as we go further along the journey? Or are we happy that we've done all we can and that the likelihood is we won't get a legal challenge from the developer?
You might have a different view to me, Anthony. My personal view of this is when we started this process, I think there was a risk that you could have a competing developer that thought, well, we'd like to be part of this, why aren't we giving the opportunity? I think we've taken legal advice at every stage. We take evaluation advice. I think the joint venture as well, which is council private sector partner. I think we've probably done as much as we can to mitigate that risk, and that's, we can't totally mitigate it, but I would have thought with the legal advice we've had, that we've probably covered enough from my perspective.
Thank you, Chair. Just to agree with Anthony there, which is often the case as well, but furthermore than that, I suppose, and we're place shaping with a property that does not belong to us. The Debenhams building is not the council's asset, but actually what we're able to do for this joint venture is develop place shaping opportunities for our district using another person. So I agree with Anthony. I think that the risk was minimal in the first place and it's diminishing as we go forward.
Okay, thank you.
I suppose the difference between receiving a legal challenge and that legal challenge being successful, I think there's a big challenge between the two. And I think it's in as much as to ensure that's the case. Right, any more on this? No, in which case then I'm going to move to the recommendations at 2. I'm not going to read them all out word for word, but you've all got them in front of you. Let's take them as a whole. All those in favour can indicate. Great, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you, officers. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. That brings us to an end.